In 40 AD, 10,000 Roman soldiers stood on the shore of the English Channel in full battle formation. Armor polished, javelins raised, shields locked together in the famous Roman testudo, the tortoise formation used to advance under enemy fire. They were not facing an army, they were facing the ocean, and their emperor had just ordered them to attack it. What happened next was witnessed by Roman soldiers, recorded by Roman historians, and has confused, disturbed, and fascinated scholars for 2,000 years. The soldiers obeyed. They charged the water. They stabbed the waves with their javelins. They hacked at the surf with their swords. And when the emperor finally raised his hand to signal the end of the battle, he declared victory over the sea. He claimed the ocean itself as a conquered territory of Rome. Then he ordered his men to collect seashells, not as a joke, as war trophies, spoils of the defeated enemy. He sent them back to Rome. This was Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, the third emperor of Rome, the man history remembers by his childhood nickname, Caligula. And the war against the ocean was not even close to the strangest thing he ever did. To understand what Caligula became, you have to understand what he was before. He was born in 12 AD to Germanicus, one of Rome's most beloved generals, and Agrippina the Elder, a woman of extraordinary political intelligence and iron will. He spent his earliest years in military camps on the Rhine frontier, where his father was commanding the Roman legions against the Germanic tribes. The soldiers adored the child. They made him a miniature uniform, a tiny version of the Caligula, the heavy military boots worn by Roman soldiers. They called him Little Boot, Caligula. He loved it. He was perhaps the most beloved child in the entire Roman army. Then everything began to fall apart. His father Germanicus died in 19 AD under circumstances that were never fully explained. Poisoning was suspected. The Emperor Tiberius, Caligula's great-uncle, was suspected of ordering it. His mother Agrippina publicly accused Tiberius of murdering her husband and spent the rest of her life paying for that accusation. She was exiled. She starved herself to death. His two older brothers were arrested on charges of treason. Both died in Roman custody. Caligula watched all of it. The boy who had been the mascot of the Rhine legions, who had played between the feet of soldiers, who had known nothing but the love of thousands of fighting men, watched his entire family destroyed one by the most powerful man in the world. And he survived by doing something that required a level of psychological control that is almost impossible to imagine in a child. He smiled. He went to live in the household of Tiberius. He ate at the emperor's table. He laughed at the emperor's jokes. He showed no grief, no anger, no resentment, no fear. Ancient sources record that the philosopher Passienus Crispus said of Caligula that there was never a better slave or a worse master. He was waiting. Tiberius died in 37 AD. Caligula was 24 years old. Rome went insane with joy. Tiberius had been a cold, paranoid, deeply unpopular ruler who had spent his final years on the island of Capri, conducting what ancient sources describe in terms that cannot be fully repeated, leaving Rome governed by fear and the letters of an increasingly erratic old man. When Caligula rode into Rome, the crowds were so thick he could barely move through the streets. Ancient historian Suetonius records that in the first 3 months of Caligula's reign, Romans sacrificed over 160,000 animals in celebration. The city partied for months. They called him their star, their baby, their darling. For the first 6 months, Caligula was everything Rome had dreamed of. He freed political prisoners. He ended treason trials. He gave money to the people. He staged spectacular games. He was generous, energetic, charming, and apparently genuinely committed to governing well. Then he got sick. In October of 37 AD, approximately 6 months into his reign, Caligula collapsed with a severe illness. Ancient sources describe it as a brain fever. He nearly died. Rome held its breath for weeks. He recovered. But something had changed. The man who came back from that illness was not the man who had gone into it. The transformation was visible almost immediately to everyone around him. Ancient sources describe the change in terms that modern psychiatrists, reading them, recognize instantly. The personality shift, the grandiosity, the cruelty, the complete dissolution of the boundary between what Caligula wanted and what Caligula was allowed to do. He began calling himself a god, not metaphorically, not in the way that Roman emperors were given divine titles as a matter of political custom. He genuinely believed it. He had the heads removed from statues of the gods in Rome and his own head placed on them. He built a bridge from the palace to the temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, so he could, as he put it, visit his brother. He began appearing in public dressed as different deities: Neptune, Mercury, Venus. He received senators while wearing a woman's dress and a golden wig. He had conversations with the statue of Jupiter and reported back to the Senate what Jupiter had said. The Senate listened and nodded and went home and locked their doors. What followed is one of the most documented reigns of terror in ancient history. He forced fathers to watch the execution of their sons and then invited them to dinner the same evening and expected them to laugh at his jokes. Ancient sources record one father who did exactly that, smiling through dinner hours after watching his child die, because the alternative was dying himself. He made his horse a senator. Whether this was a genuine act of madness or a savage political joke aimed at an institution he despised, historians still argue. But the effect was the same either way. The Senate of Rome sat in session with a horse. He built a temporary bridge of boats across the Bay of Baiae, approximately 3 miles of connected ships, just so he could ride his horse across it in a golden breastplate that had allegedly once belonged to Alexander the Great. Ancient historian Suetonius records this was done to defy an astrologer's prediction that Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. He invented new taxes on food, on lawsuits, on the earnings of prostitutes, on the wages of laborers. The treasury Tiberius had carefully accumulated was gone within a year. He executed people for looking at him the wrong way, for coughing during a performance he was giving, for not laughing at his jokes, for laughing too hard at his jokes and making him feel they were mocking him. The fear in Rome during the years 38 to 41 AD was total and absolute. Which brings us back to the beach. In 40 AD, Caligula marched his legions to the English Channel, to the coast of Gaul facing Britain. The official story was a military campaign to conquer Britain, which Julius Caesar had attempted and not completed. The legions were assembled, the ships were prepared, everything was in place, and then Caligula looked at the water and declared war on Neptune, god of the sea. The order went out. The soldiers formed up. They advanced into the surf. They fought the waves. When it was done, Caligula walked among his legions collecting the seashells himself, putting them into his helmet, calling them the spoils of the conquered ocean. He wrote back to Rome, describing a magnificent military victory. He began planning a triumph, the grand military parade through the streets of Rome, awarded only to generals who had won significant victories in the field. His advisors quietly suggested that a triumph for defeating the ocean might face some political opposition. He went back to Rome anyway. He had been emperor for 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. On the 24th of January, 41 AD, Caligula was walking through a covered corridor at the Palatine Games when members of his own Praetorian Guard surrounded him. They had a list of grievances, they had a plan, and they had swords. He was stabbed 30 times. The man who had made himself a god, who had declared war on the ocean, who had put his horse in the Senate, who had destroyed the treasury and terrorized the most powerful city on earth, died on the floor of a corridor with 30 wounds in him. His wife and infant daughter were killed the same day. The Praetorian Guard went to find his uncle Claudius, a man everyone had dismissed as a harmless fool, hiding behind a curtain in the palace. They pulled him out and declared him emperor. The machine kept running. But here is what history has never fully answered. the illness in October of 37 AD. The 6 months of good governance, followed by years of apparent madness. The transformation that everyone around him saw happen and no one could explain. Was Caligula truly insane? Or was he a man who had watched his entire family destroyed by an emperor and decided that the only way to survive was to make himself so terrifying, so unpredictable, so utterly beyond rational engagement that no one would ever dare do to him what Tiberius had done to them? Was the war against the ocean the act of a madman? Or the performance of a man who had learned that in Rome, the most dangerous thing you could be was predictable? We do not know. We will never know. And that uncertainty is the most disturbing thing about Caligula of all.